That medicine is for my dying sister, and I'm telling you right now, Mr. Dawson, I will work every day for a month to pay you back. But I will not walk out of this store without it." The whole room went silent. Every head turned, and Gerald Dawson looked at Anna Whitmore, her worn dress, her 3 coins, her shaking hands, and said, "No." The laughter started before she even reached the door. She walked out into the Arizona sun with nothing. No medicine, no money, no one. Then she heard boots behind her. One man had watched everything, and he whispered, "Ride with me tonight." If this story moves you, subscribe to our channel and drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story has traveled. The coins made a small sound when they hit the wooden counter. 3 of them. Worn thin from years of passing between hands that needed them more than they had them. Anna Whitmore set them down carefully, the way a person sets down something they know isn't enough, but offer anyway, because it's everything they've got. She had been standing in line for 11 minutes. She had counted every one of them. The store smelled like sawdust and dried tobacco, and the particular kind of heat that builds inside a building when the Arizona sun has been working on it all morning. There were 6 other customers. She had felt their eyes on her from the moment she walked through the door. Not because she had done anything wrong, but because people in small towns have a way of knowing immediately who belongs and who doesn't. Anna Whitmore, 26 years old, in a blue dress that had been washed so many times, the color had mostly gone out of it, did not belong. She knew it. They knew it. The only question was how long it would take before that fact became official. "Mr. Dawson," she said. She kept her voice even. She had practiced keeping her voice even. "I need flour, a small measure of salt, and the medicine, the one you keep behind the counter. Dr. Heller said it's what helps with the fever." Gerald Dawson looked at the coins. He didn't touch them. He just looked at them the way a man looks at a problem he doesn't want to deal with. Then he looked at Anna. Then he looked at her dress. "That's not enough," he said. 2 of the women near the bolts of fabric turned around. One of them, Anna didn't know her name, only that she had a hat with a yellow ribbon, and the expression of someone who enjoys watching things go badly for other people, tilted her head slightly. "I can work for the difference," Anna said. "I can sweep. I can stock shelves, whatever you need." "I don't need sweeping." "Then I can—" "Miss." Dawson cut her off without raising his voice, which somehow made it worse. "I've already told you twice this week. I don't extend credit to people I don't know. That's my policy. My sister is sick." Anna said it plainly, not to manipulate, just because it was true and she needed him to understand that this wasn't about her. "She's been running a fever for 2 days. The medicine, it's not much. I'll pay the full amount back by Friday. I have a job prospect. Everyone who comes in here short has a job prospect." Dawson folded his hands on the counter. He wasn't cruel about it. That was almost the worst part. He was just done. "I'm sorry about your sister. I am. But I can't run a business on promises." The woman with the yellow ribbon whispered something to the woman beside her. Both of them looked at Anna. One of them smiled, but not in a kind way. "She thinks she can just walk in here and ask for charity," the yellow ribbon woman said, not particularly quietly. A man near the door snorted. "Women like her always think someone's going to save them." Anna heard every word. She was good at hearing things people thought she couldn't hear. She had been hearing things like that her whole life. Since her father died and her mother got sick, and the relatives who were supposed to help looked at Anna and her little sister Clara the way Gerald Dawson was looking at those 3 coins right now, like a problem they had already decided wasn't their responsibility. She reached out and picked her coins back up. Her fingers were steady. She made sure of that. "Thank you anyway," she said. She turned and walked toward the door, and she kept her pace even and her shoulders straight, because she was not going to give anyone in that room the satisfaction of watching her hurry. She pushed through the door, and the heat outside hit her like a wall. She stopped walking about 6 steps from the entrance and stood there on the boardwalk and breathed. "Don't cry. Not here. Not where they can see you through the window." Her sister was in this boarding house 2 streets over, wrapped in the only blanket they owned, with a fever that had climbed steadily since yesterday morning. The woman who ran the boarding house, Mrs. Enid Pratt, had been decent enough so far. Decent meaning she hadn't thrown them out yet, though she had made it clear she expected the week's payment by Sunday. Anna had exactly 3 coins and no job, and a sister who needed medicine. She closed her eyes for 1 second, just one. Then she heard boots on the boardwalk behind her. Slow, deliberate, not rushing. "Ma'am." The voice was low. The kind of voice that comes from a man who doesn't use many words, and so the ones he does use tend to land with some weight. Anna turned around. She had seen this man before. You didn't live in Red Creek for more than 2 days without knowing who Caleb Morgan was, or at least knowing of him. He was the kind of man a town talked about without him ever seeming to notice. Tall, broad through the shoulders, with the particular kind of stillness that belongs to men who have spent years alone in open country. He was maybe 35, with dark hair going silver at the temples and a face that had been weathered into something that wasn't exactly handsome in the conventional sense, but was absolutely impossible to look away from. He owned Silver Oak Ranch, 5,000 acres north of town, more cattle than anyone else in the territory. He had a reputation for keeping his word and not saying a single thing more than was necessary. He was standing there holding his hat in his hands, which struck her as odd. Anna straightened her spine. "If you followed me out here to offer pity," she said, "save your breath. I'm fine." "I can see that," Caleb said. "Then what do you want?" He didn't answer immediately. He looked past her for a moment down the street, the way men sometimes do when they're choosing their words. Then he looked back at her. "I need a housekeeper," he said. "At the ranch. It's been empty for a while. The position pays fair wages, room for you and anyone else you're responsible for, and 3 meals a day." Anna stared at him. "You don't know me." "No. You watched me get turned away from a store counter, and your response was to offer me a job." "Yes." She shook her head slowly. "That's not how things work. People don't—" She stopped. "What did you see in there that made you decide I was worth hiring?" Caleb looked at her directly. He had gray eyes, she noticed. The kind that didn't shift around. "You had 3 coins," he said. "Not enough. The man told you no, and your first response wasn't to argue about yourself. It was to explain that your sister needed medicine." He paused. "That tells me something about the kind of person you are. It tells you I'm desperate. It tells me your first instinct when you're losing is to think about someone else." He put his hat back on. "That's not desperation. That's character." Anna looked at him for a long moment. She had been warned about men like this. Men who showed up with offers when a woman was at her lowest point. Her mother had warned her. Life had warned her. She had learned young that generosity from strangers usually came with a price you didn't discover until you were already in too deep to get out. "What are the terms?" she said. "Fair wages, paid weekly, your own room and one for your sister, 3 meals, Sundays off." He said it the way a man reads from a list he's thought about in advance. "The work is real work. I won't pretend otherwise. The ranch is large and it's been poorly managed on the domestic side for some time. But I don't ask for anything beyond the job. And if it doesn't work out, then you leave with whatever I owe you to that point, and no hard feelings." Anna looked down at the 3 coins in her palm. "My sister is sick," she said. "She needs medicine tonight." Caleb reached into his vest pocket without any dramatic flourish and set a silver dollar on the boardwalk railing beside her. "For the medicine," he said. "That's not part of the offer. That's just a man helping a sick child get what she needs. No strings." Anna didn't touch the coin. "Why?" "Because no child should go without medicine, because a storekeeper won't extend 20 cents of credit." His voice stayed level, but something in it hardened slightly. "Take the coin, Miss Whitmore. Get your sister the medicine, and then if you want the job, meet me at the North Road at sundown." He turned to go. "Ride with me tonight," he added. Not a question. Not quite. Just an offer laid out and left there for her to take or not. Anna picked up the coin. She told herself it was only because of Clara. She told herself a lot of things that afternoon. She went back into the store. The bell above the door made the same cheerful sound it had before, which struck her as offensive under the circumstances. Every head in the place turned when she walked in, and when they saw she was back, the expressions ranged from surprised to quietly amused. She walked directly to the counter and set the silver dollar down. "The medicine," she said, "and the flour and the salt, please." Gerald Dawson looked at the dollar. He looked at Anna. Whatever calculation he was running in his head, it didn't take long. "Yes, ma'am," he said. He didn't apologize. She didn't expect him to. The woman with the yellow ribbon made a sound something between a hum and a comment that never quite finished itself. Anna didn't look at her. She kept her eyes on Dawson while he wrapped the medicine and measured out the flour and the salt, and she took the package and her change, and she walked back out the same way she came in, steadily spine straight, nothing on her face. Outside, she let herself breathe. She had enough left over from the dollar to cover tomorrow's bread. Not much, but something. She walked back toward the boarding house, and she thought about Caleb Morgan and his gray eyes, and the way he had said that's character, like it was a simple, obvious fact, and not something anyone had ever said to her before in her entire life. Clara's fever broke around 3 in the afternoon. She was 11 years old, thin in the way that children get when they haven't had quite enough of anything for too long. And when the medicine finally started working, she fell into a real sleep. Not the restless tossing of a sick child, but the deep, boneless sleep of a body that has finally stopped fighting. Anna sat on the edge of the narrow bed and watched her breathe. She had made this trip west because she ran out of other options. She had been working in her aunt's house in Missouri for 2 years after her mother passed, keeping house, caring for Clara in exchange for a roof and food. It was a reasonable arrangement until her aunt's husband decided it wasn't and told Anna she had a month to find somewhere else to be. She had money from her mother's ring, just enough for train tickets to Arizona Territory, where she'd heard work was available on the frontier. That had been the rumor. Work was available. People needed hands. What the rumor hadn't specified was that the work available to a woman alone with a young sister and no references and no family connections was primarily the kind of work Anna wasn't willing to do. She'd applied to 3 households as a housekeeper in the week since arriving in Red Creek. 2 hadn't answered. 1 had taken 1 look at her and said they needed someone more established. She had been in town 7 days, and she had 40 cents a sick sister and no prospects. Until now. She looked at Clara sleeping and thought, if this is another trap, it's a very well-constructed one. She thought about Caleb Morgan's voice, the way he said no strings, the way he'd given her the coin and then looked away before she could thank him, like he genuinely didn't want to make anything of it. She thought about what he'd said. Your first instinct when you're losing is to think about someone else. Nobody had noticed that before, or if they had, they'd never said so. She packed their things, which didn't take long, there wasn't much, and woke Clara gently as the sun started its late afternoon tilt. We're going to a ranch, she told her, north of town. Clara, still groggy with sleep, and the fading edges of fever blinked at her. Is it nice? I don't know yet, Anna said honestly. But it's a roof, and I think the man who owns it is decent. How do you know? Anna thought about the silver dollar set down with no ceremony and no expectation. I don't know for certain, she said, but I have a feeling. The north road in the late afternoon was the color of rust and honey, and Caleb was already there when Anna arrived with Clara and their bag. He had a wagon, not just a horse, which she hadn't expected. A practical man, she thought. He saw a woman with a sick child and a bag, and he brought a wagon. He looked at Clara with an expression Anna couldn't quite name, something careful and not unkind. How's she feeling? He asked. Better, Anna said. The medicine helped. He nodded once. Then he climbed up to the driver's seat and waited. Anna helped Clara up into the wagon bed, settled her against the side with their bag as a cushion, and then climbed up beside her. She noticed there was a blanket folded at the back of the wagon. Clean. Not new, but carefully kept. She spread it over Clara without comment. The wagon moved. For the first mile, nobody said anything. The sun was getting lower, and the Arizona sky was doing what Arizona skies do in the evening, turning into something almost unreasonably beautiful, all orange and deep rose, and the first pale hints of purple. "Your sister's name?" Caleb asked, not looking back. "Clara," Anna said. "How long has she been sick?" 2 days. It was worse last night." He nodded. "There's a doctor who comes through from Tucson every other week," he said. "She should be seen when he's next in." "I'll pay." "The ranch will cover medical for anyone living on it," he said. "That's standard." Anna opened her mouth, closed it, said, "All right." Clara, who had been pretending to sleep but was clearly listening, opened one eye and looked at Anna with an expression that said, "I like him." Anna looked back at her with an expression that said, "Go to sleep." Clara closed her eye. The corner of her mouth went up slightly. Silver Oak Ranch announced itself before they arrived. The land itself changed from the scrubby dry growth near town to something that felt more cared for, more deliberate. There were fences in good repair, cattle in the distance. The smell of water, which in Arizona territory was not a small thing. The ranch house was large, not ostentatious. It wasn't the kind of house built to impress visitors. It was the kind of house built to last. Stone foundation-wide porch that wrapped around 2 sides windows that were real glass and not oilcloth. There were 2 ranch hands near the barn who stopped what they were doing to watch the wagon pull in. Anna saw the look that passed between them. She was familiar with that look. It was the one that said, "Who's this?" in a tone that was not particularly welcoming. The older of the two, a broad man with a red beard that was going gray, walked over as Caleb brought the wagon to a stop. "Boss?" he said, nodding at Caleb. Then he looked at Anna, then at Clara, then back at Caleb. "Company." "New housekeeper," Caleb said. "Anna Whitmore, her sister Clara. They'll be in the East Room." Redbeard. She would learn his name was Hank Briley, and that he'd worked for Caleb for 8 years, and that he had a particular distrust of anything that disrupted the routine, said nothing for a moment. Then, "The East Room hasn't been aired out since." "Then air it out," Caleb said mildly. He said it without sharpness. Just as a fact, the way you'd say the sky is clear, or it will be cold tonight. And Hank Briley, who was clearly the kind of man who pushed back on most things, did not push back on that. "Yes, sir," he said. He walked back toward the barn, and Anna had the distinct impression that the look she'd seen when the wagon pulled in was about to be shared with everyone else on the property by nightfall. The East Room had 2 narrow beds, a window that looked toward the mountains, and a small table with a lamp. It was the most space Anna and Clara had shared in 2 years. Clara sat on the edge of one of the beds and bounced slightly, testing it. "It's real," she said with the gravity of someone confirming an important fact. "Yes," Anna said. "The mattress has real stuffing." Clara. "I'm just noting." "I know what you're noting." Anna set their bag down on the table. "Lie down. You're still sick." "I feel better." "You feel better because of medicine. That doesn't mean you're well." She pulled back the blanket on the second bed and patted it. "Lie down. I need to go introduce myself properly and find out what's expected of me. I'll bring you something to eat." Clara lay down with the exaggerated martyrdom of an 11-year-old who knows she's not going to win. "Are we going to stay?" she asked. Anna paused at the door. "I don't know yet," she said. "Let me find out first." The kitchen was the largest room she'd been given to manage in her working life. It was also, she discovered quickly, an absolute catastrophe. Not dirty. Precisely, someone had kept the basics from getting out of hand, but disorganized in the way that things get when a series of people have each added their own system without removing the previous one. There were supplies stored in 3 different places with no logic to them. The spice shelf had 4 jars of cumin and no salt. The preserves were organized by size of jar rather than contents, which meant you had to open 6 of them to find what you needed. The pantry door had a warped hinge that made it stick every time. Anna stood in the middle of the kitchen and took stock for a long, methodical moment. Then she started. She wasn't hired to manage the kitchen tonight. She was hired to be the housekeeper starting tomorrow, and there was no one expecting her to do anything right now except rest. She started anyway. It was 9:30 at night when Caleb Morgan walked into the kitchen and found her on her knees, reorganizing the bottom shelves of the pantry, every jar and tin spread out on the floor around her in a pattern that made sense to no one yet, but would. He stopped in the doorway. "Miss Whitmore, the pantry hinge needs fixing," she said without looking up. "I've made a note. Also, whoever has been ordering supplies has been buying cumin in amounts that suggest they believe this ranch runs on cumin specifically. I found 4 tins. That's not a reasonable quantity." A pause. "We lost the cook 2 months ago," Caleb said. "The last ranch hand to handle supplies had his own ideas. They were wrong ideas." She lifted a heavy jar of preserved peaches and examined the date marked on the lid. "These are from 1882. They should go." "Probably." She finally looked up at him. He was leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed and an expression she couldn't immediately read. Not irritated, not amused exactly. "You don't have to do this tonight," he said. "I know. You just arrived. You have a sick sister who needs looking after. Clara is asleep. The kitchen is a problem that will take twice as long to fix if I wait until tomorrow because I'll spend the first 3 hours relearning where everything isn't." She turned back to the shelf. "I'm more useful when I have something to organize." Another pause. Longer this time. "All right," Caleb said finally. He pushed himself off the doorframe and walked to the stove and put the kettle on without asking if she wanted tea, which she did. He sat down at the kitchen table. "How long have you been keeping house?" he asked. "Since I was 16, Anna said. "My mother was sick. Then I worked for my aunt for 2 years. Before that, I'd been helping run our household since I was 12 when my father's health started failing." "That's a long time." "It is." "You're good at it." "I am." She said it simply without apology. "I'm very good at it. I know how to manage a household on limited resources, how to stretch supplies, how to keep things running when things are going wrong." She paused. "I've had a lot of practice at things going wrong." Caleb was quiet. The kettle started to heat. "The men won't make it easy," he said. "Not at first. They're used to a certain way." "I know. Hank in particular. He's loyal, but he doesn't like change." "I noticed." Anna sat back on her heels and looked at the row she'd finished. "Is he the kind of man who respects work, or the kind of man who only respects the people doing work he'd already decided to respect?" The silence lasted long enough that she looked over at him. Caleb Morgan was almost smiling. "He's the first kind," he said. "Eventually." "Then it'll be fine," Anna said. "Eventually." She went back to the shelf. The kettle whistled. Caleb Morgan got up and made 2 cups of tea, and he left one on the floor beside her within reach without comment. She drank it while she worked, and she thought, "This is strange, and I don't know what it is, but it doesn't feel like a trap." She thought that's probably how traps work. She kept working anyway. By midnight, the pantry was organized. By midnight, she had also made a list 2 pages long of what was missing, what needed replacing, what the ranch had too much of, and what needed to be done before the kitchen could run properly. She found Caleb still at the kitchen table. He had papers spread out in front of him, ranch accounts by the look of them, and he was working through them with the kind of concentrated focus that suggested this was his usual late-night routine. She set the 2-page list on the table beside his papers. He picked it up, read it. His eyebrows went up slightly. "Some of this will take time to get," he said. "I know. I've marked what's urgent with an asterisk. The rest can wait." He read through it again. "This is thorough. I'm thorough." He looked up at her over the top of the page. "Miss Whitmore," he said, "go to sleep." "I will. Tonight." "Yes." She picked up her lamp. "Thank you," For today. All of it. He looked back at the papers. "Good night," he said. She went to bed. She lay in the dark and listened to the sound of a ranch at night, the cattle somewhere in the distance, the wind working at the edges of the building, the occasional creak of the structure settling. Clara was asleep beside her, breathing evenly. The mattress was real, like her sister said. Anna stared at the ceiling. She thought about the look on Hank Briley's face when the wagon pulled in. She thought about the other ranch hand younger, who hadn't said anything but had watched everything. She thought about the store and the laughter and the 3 coins that weren't enough. She thought about Caleb Morgan making 2 cups of tea and leaving one on the floor without ceremony. She thought, "I don't know what this place is yet." She thought, "But it's a chance." She thought, "And I am very good at making the most of a chance." And then, finally, exhaustion pulled her under, and she slept. She woke before 5. Old habit. She dressed quietly, let Clara sleep, and went to the kitchen. She made coffee. She made it correctly strong, not bitter the way it should be done, and she had breakfast started before any of the ranch hands were up. Hank Briley walked into the kitchen at 5:45. He stopped. He looked at the stove. He looked at Anna. He looked at the organized pantry, the cleared counter, the list of things still needed, tucked to one side. "Coffee's ready," Anna said. "Biscuits in 15 minutes. Hank Briley looked at her for a long moment. "You been up since 5, he said. 4:52, she said. Another long look. He walked to the coffee pot, poured himself a cup, took a drink. Something in his face shifted. "Biscuits," he said. 15 minutes, she said. He sat down at the kitchen table with his coffee, and he didn't say anything else, but he didn't leave either. And that Anna thought was how you start. Not with grand gestures. Not by announcing yourself or demanding respect. You start by making the coffee right, and you let the work speak. The biscuits were gone in 4 minutes. Hank Briley ate 2 of them standing up at the counter, which he took as a compliment, because a man who doesn't trust you doesn't stand still long enough in your kitchen to eat twice. The younger ranch hand she'd learned his name was Pete Dawes, 19 years old. No relation to the shopkeeper, a fact he volunteered immediately, and with some feeling came in behind Hank and stopped dead when he smelled the coffee. "That's real coffee," Pete said. Not a question. A statement of awe. "It is," Anna said. "The last cook made coffee that tasted like hot dirt." "Pete," Hank said, "I'm just saying. I know what you're saying. Drink it and be quiet." Pete drank it. He was quiet for about 40 seconds, which seemed to be his limit. "You made biscuits too," he said. "I did." "Hank, she made biscuits." "I have eyes, Pete. Real ones, not the hard kind." Anna set another plate on the table and said nothing. There were 4 more ranch hands who came through that morning. 2 of them older men who had been with the ranch for years and regarded her with the particular wariness of people who have seen staff come and go and have decided not to invest in new arrivals until they've proven they're staying. One of them, a lean, weathered man named Cord, who didn't offer his last name and didn't seem to feel he needed to, looked at the organized counter, looked at Anna and said simply, "You changed the pantry." "I reorganized it." "Where's the cumin?" "Second shelf, left side, behind the paprika." He went and checked, came back, said nothing, ate his biscuit. Caleb came in last already in his work clothes, and he looked at the kitchen the way a man looks at something that has shifted in a way he hasn't fully processed yet. The change wasn't dramatic. Everything was still in the same room, but the order of it was different, and order changes the feeling of a place in ways that are hard to name. He poured his own coffee and leaned against the counter. "How's Clara?" he asked. "Better. She's still sleeping." "Good." He looked at the list she'd pinned near the stove. "I'll send Pete into town for the urgent items this morning. The asterisked ones can wait until—" "I'll send him this morning," Caleb said again mildly. "Just that's decided." Anna looked at him for a moment. "All right," she said. Pete, who had been listening with the focused attention of someone hoping to be mentioned, sat up straighter. "I can go now. I'm done with—" "After you finish the fence line on the south pasture," Caleb said. Pete's face fell. "But the fence line will take all morning." "Yes," Caleb agreed. "It will." He took his coffee and walked out. Pete looked at Anna. Anna looked back at him with an expression that said, "Don't look at me." "The fence line," Hank said without looking up from his plate, "is not going to fix itself, Peter." Pete stood up, grabbed one more biscuit for the road, and went. Dud. The first week was a war she fought in silence. Not with Caleb. He was, if anything, easier to work around than she'd expected. He was a man of consistent habits, and he asked for very little beyond competence and reliability, both of which she had in abundance. He was also, she discovered, the kind of employer who noticed work without making a production of noticing it. He didn't offer daily praise. He offered something more useful he got out of her way. The war was with the ranch itself, with years of accumulated bad habits in how the household ran. With supplies ordered wrong and things repaired halfway, and a dozen small systems put in place by a dozen different people that all worked slightly against each other. She fixed them methodically, one at a time. She repaired the pantry hinge herself, using tools she found in the back shed, because there was no point putting something on a list if you could handle it in 20 minutes. She rearranged the supply ordering so that things were bought in the right quantities and came in at the right time. She found a box of old wool blankets in a storage room that had been shoved in there and forgotten. Most of them torn, some moth-eaten at the edges, and she started mending them in the evenings, working through the pile systematically. Hank found her at it one night, sitting at the kitchen table with a lamp and a needle. "Those are from 3 winters ago," he said. "Boss bought new ones." "The new ones are in the bunkhouse," Anna said. "These can go to the tack room. The men use the tack room in cold weather sometimes." Hank looked at the blanket she was mending, then at the pile still to go. "That's a lot of work," he said, "for a tack room. Things that are broken aren't always useless," she said. "They usually just need someone to bother." He stood there for a moment. Then he sat down across from her and picked up the next blanket in the pile and started examining the tear in it. "I used to sew," he said, as if this were a deeply inconvenient truth. "Before the ranch. My mother made me learn." He paused. "Got a spare needle?" Anna pulled one from the cushion and set it on the table without comment. They mended in silence for the better part of an hour. It wasn't friendship, not yet, but it was something. Clara recovered fast, the way children do when they finally have enough to eat and a real bed and don't have to worry about where they're sleeping next week. Within 4 days, she was following Hank around the barn with the focused intensity of a child who has decided this is the most interesting person she has ever met, and Hank, for his part, pretended to find this annoying while very clearly not finding it annoying at all. He taught her how to brush down a horse properly. He showed her how to tell if a horse was nervous by the position of its ears. He did not, as far as Anna could tell, allow anyone else to see him doing this. She didn't say anything about it. She just noted it and filed it away in the same place she filed everything she noticed, a mental record she kept of how things actually worked at Silver Oak Ranch, as opposed to how they appeared to work from the outside. It was on the 5th day that she first saw what the ranch was actually dealing with. She was going through the household accounts Caleb had given her access because she needed to manage supply spending, and she couldn't do that without numbers, and she found an inconsistency. It wasn't dramatic. It wouldn't have looked like anything to most people. A supply order placed 3 months ago that didn't match the quantities received. A discrepancy in the water system maintenance costs that was listed twice under different names. She almost moved past it. She didn't. She sat with those numbers and turned them over the way she'd learned to turn things over slowly from every angle, without deciding what they meant until she'd looked at them long enough to be sure. Then she made a note, and she said nothing. Not yet. The problem with Red Creek, Anna discovered, was that news traveled sideways before it traveled anywhere else. Which meant that by the time she'd been at Silver Oak Ranch for 2 weeks, half the town knew she was there, and the half that knew had opinions about it. She found this out when she went into town with Pete to collect the supply order. The first sign was the way conversation shifted when she walked past two women outside the dressmaker's shop. Not stopping, just changing pitch the way conversations do when someone new enters earshot and the topic suddenly becomes the weather. The second sign was more direct. She was at the counter of Dawson's General Store. Different experience from 2 weeks ago. Different posture, different kind of standing, because she had wages now, and an account on behalf of the ranch, and Gerald Dawson, whatever else he was a man who understood credit terms when she heard the voice behind her. "Miss Whitmore." She turned. Clara Whitfield was the kind of beautiful that people in small towns talk about because there isn't that much to talk about. She was perhaps 23 with dark hair and a yellow dress that probably cost more than everything Anna owned, and the composed, careful expression of a woman who has been told all her life that her face is her best feature and has organized herself around that information. She was also, Anna could tell immediately, furious. "Miss Whitfield," Anna said. She said it pleasantly because she had long ago learned that pleasantness in the face of hostility is both more dignified and more strategic than matching the hostility. "I heard you've taken a position at Silver Oak Ranch," Clara said. "That's right." "As the housekeeper?" "Yes." Clara smiled. It was the kind of smile that doesn't reach anything above the mouth. "That must be a relief, given your situation." "It's good work," Anna agreed. "Caleb is very generous." Clara let the sentence sit there for a moment with all the weight she meant for it to carry. "With people he feels sorry for." Anna looked at her steadily. "He's been a good employer," she said. "I'm grateful for the opportunity." "I'm sure you are." Clara stepped slightly closer. Her voice dropped to something that was still perfectly audible but had the texture of a confidence. "I want to give you some friendly advice, Miss Whitmore, because I think you're new here and you may not understand how things work." "I'm listening," Anna said. "Caleb Morgan is not a man looking for a wife. He had a wife. He's not looking for another one. And women who come to this territory with nothing and find their way onto wealthy men's properties." She paused, like she was choosing the next words carefully. "They sometimes develop ideas about their position, about what their situation might become." She looked at Anna with something that was almost kind if you didn't look at the eyes. "I'd hate to see you get hurt," she said, "when things don't work out the way you're imagining." Gerald Dawson was pretending to organize something behind the counter. The woman near the fabric bolts had stopped moving. Anna looked at Clara Whitfield for a long, quiet moment. "Thank you," she said, "for the advice." Clara nodded, satisfied. "I'm not imagining anything," Anna said. "I'm doing a job I was hired to do, and I'm doing it well. That's all I'm thinking about." She picked up the first of the supply packages. "I hope your day goes well, Miss Whitfield." She walked out. She handed the packages to Pete, who had been waiting with the wagon and who had, based on his expression, heard everything through the open door and was trying very hard not to have an opinion about it. "Ready," Anna said. "Yes, ma'am," Pete said with the careful neutrality of a young man who has decided that this situation is above his pay grade. She climbed up beside him. They drove out of town, and she looked straight ahead, and she thought about what Clara Whitfield had said. Not the cruel part she'd heard cruel before, but the other part. He had a wife. The way she'd said it, like it was a wall. Like it was something final. She hadn't known that. Or she'd known in the vague way you know things people talk about without talking to you directly, that Caleb Morgan was alone, that the ranch had been without a family feeling for years. She hadn't known there had been a specific person, a specific loss. It explained some things. The way the house had felt when she arrived. The way he was careful with words, deliberate in a way that felt like a man who had learned at some point that there are things you can't unsay. She thought about the 2 cups of tea on her first night. She thought, be careful, Anna. She thought, this is a job. That's all it is. Do the job and don't invent anything. She thought these things very firmly and with great conviction and put them away somewhere they would definitely stay. The thing about Anna Whitmore, which the ranch hands took varying amounts of time to understand, was that she noticed everything. It wasn't obvious because she didn't make it obvious. She didn't ask a lot of questions. She didn't hover. She went about her work, and she kept her eyes open and her thoughts to herself, and she registered things the way water registers the shape of whatever container it's in, quietly, completely. It was the supply records that first told her something was wrong. She'd been working through the accounts for 3 weeks when she found the second discrepancy. It wasn't the same one as before, different line, different month, but it had the same quality to it. Something listed that didn't match. A payment made to a vendor she'd never seen a delivery from. She started keeping a separate ledger. She didn't say anything to Caleb. Not yet. She needed more before she brought something to a man like that, because a man who deals in facts, and she had understood this about him quickly, doesn't respond well to suspicion without evidence. He responds to evidence. So she built the evidence quietly in the margins of her evenings after Clara was asleep and the kitchen was clean and the accounts were done. The third week, Cord came to her. Cord, who had given his name and nothing else and eaten his biscuit in silence that first morning, who had been at the ranch for 6 years and who watched things the way old ranch hands do with a kind of tired expertise. He came into the kitchen in the late afternoon when everyone else was out and stood near the door with his hat in his hands in a way that made him look briefly much younger than he was. "You've been going through the books," he said. Anna looked at him over her shoulder. "It's part of my job." "I know." He paused. "Have you found anything?" She turned to face him fully. "What are you asking me, Cord?" He looked at the floor. He looked at the wall. He looked at her. There was a man worked here before, left over from the previous foreman before Hank. His name was Ray Sutton. He left 4 months ago. Why did he leave? Caleb let him go. Caught him taking small things, not enough to make a big deal of. Tack some rope, nothing serious. Cord paused. Or that's what Caleb thought. But you think it was more than rope. Cord's jaw moved for a moment. I don't know what it was. I'm not good with numbers. But some things around the ranch don't add up to me. Equipment going missing that was here and then wasn't. Water system running lower than it should for where the season is. He stopped. I'm not a man who makes accusations. I believe in keeping my own counsel. But you're good with numbers, he said. And I thought you should know that name. Ray Sutton. He put his hat back on. That's all, he said. He went back outside. Anna stood very still for a moment. Then she went back to her ledger. She added a new column. She wrote Sutton at the top of it. 3 days later she found it. Not all of it. She wasn't close to all of it, but the thread of it. A vendor payment that traced back through 2 different names that weren't quite right to an account she recognized from the tax records she'd been cross-referencing. An account connected to a man named Henry Caldwell, who ran a land office in Tucson, and who had 3 months before Ray Sutton left the ranch, made an offer to purchase Silver Oak Ranch at a price significantly below what the land was worth. Caleb had refused the offer. She'd found the letter filed with the account's a short, unambiguous refusal in Caleb's handwriting 3 sentences. After the refusal, the small thefts started. After the small thefts, the water system began running low. She sat with her ledger and her pages of notes, and she thought about the shape of it. A man who wanted to buy land. A man who had been refused. A man who then, if what the numbers suggested was true, began finding ways to make the land worth less. To make the ranch fail. To make the refusal look like a mistake. It was patient work, if that's what it was. Methodical. The kind of sabotage that looked like bad luck from the outside. Equipment failing. Supplies going missing. Water system underperforming. She thought, I need more. She thought, I need to be certain before I bring this to Caleb. She thought, I have been wrong about things before, and I know what it costs to be wrong in front of a man whose respect you're still earning. So she kept looking. The night she found the proof, real proof documented traceable, was the same night everything else decided to happen at once. It had been a long day. Hank had come in at noon looking like a man carrying bad news, and the news was bad. The main water cistern that fed the southern grazing land was running at 1/3 of its usual capacity. Not drought, the rains had been reasonable. Running low for reasons that didn't explain themselves. Caleb and Hank had ridden out to look at it and come back with the same faces people bring back from things they can't immediately fix. Caleb had been at the kitchen table with his accounts, and a silence that had a different quality from his usual silence, tighter, harder. And Anna had kept out of his way while keeping coffee available and not asking questions. Pete had mentioned quietly while she was in the kitchen that Henry Caldwell's agent had been seen in Red Creek. She'd kept her expression neutral. "When?" she said. "Yesterday," Pete said. Asking around about the ranch, whether things were going well. He paused. Whether the boss was thinking about selling. She thanked him and went back to her cooking. And that evening when Clara was asleep, and Hank and the men had gone to the bunkhouse, and Caleb was still at the table with his papers, she came in with her ledger and her pages of notes, and she set them down in front of him. He looked at the stack. "What is this?" he said. "Sit with it for a moment before you say anything," she said. "Please." Something in her voice, some quality she hadn't planned, a steadiness that came from 3 weeks of being certain before she spoke, made him close his mouth. He picked up the first page. He read. She watched him read. She watched the moment he stopped and went back to a line. She watched him turn to the second page and read through it with a different kind of attention. The kind that means something has shifted, that the mind has moved from reading to understanding. He didn't speak until he'd gone through all of it. Then he set the papers down. He looked at her. "Sutton," he said. Ray Sutton routed payments through 2 shell accounts to an operating fund connected to Caldwell's land office in Tucson. He was receiving payments from Caldwell starting 6 months before he left the ranch, before the thefts started, before the water system began failing. She pointed to a page. "This is the vendor account that doesn't exist. I tracked it through the tax filings." Caleb was quiet for a long time. "The water system," he said finally. "I don't know the exact mechanism yet, but the timing lines up. Sutton was here. He had access. He was being paid." She paused. "Your water system doesn't fail on its own in a season with adequate rain. Something is interfering with it." Caleb stood up from the table. He walked to the window and he stood there with his back to her and his hand flat against the frame. "I let him go," he said. "I thought it was rope and tack." "That's what he wanted you to think." "I underestimated it. You didn't have reason to think otherwise." "I should have." "Caleb." She said it quietly, but she said it. He turned. "You trusted a man who was working hard to look trustworthy. That's not a failure. That's being deceived." She held his gaze. "What matters now is what we do with what we know." He looked at her for a long moment. The lamp between them made the kitchen feel smaller than it was, the light pulling everything toward the center of the room. "We," he said. She realized what she'd said. "What you do," she corrected. "No." Something shifted in his expression. "We. You found it. You tracked it." He picked up the pages again. "You've been working on this for 3 weeks without saying anything, because you wanted to be sure. I didn't want to bring you something incomplete. You could have told me earlier. I could have. And you would have asked questions I couldn't answer yet." She held his gaze. "I spent my whole life being dismissed for being incomplete, for having the beginning of something, but not the whole thing. I wasn't going to come to you with half a case." He set the papers down slowly. "Anna, you should contact the territorial authorities," she said. "And you need someone to look at the water system who knows what intentional damage looks like." "Yes." He didn't move. "Anna." She looked at him. "Thank you," he said. She nodded once. She picked up her lamp. "Good night," she said. She went down the hall and she stood outside Clara's door for a moment. She could hear from the kitchen behind her the sound of Caleb Morgan still at the table, the specific silence of a man sitting with something large and needing to work out what to do with it. She went to bed. She didn't sleep for a long time. She lay there and thought about the way he'd said "we" and then let her correct it, and then said "we" again. She thought, this is a job. She thought, stay focused on the job. She thought about the shape of a ranch that had been empty for years and was slowly starting to feel like something else. She closed her eyes. She thought Clara is safe. The work is good, and for the first time in a long time, someone thinks I'm worth taking seriously. She thought that's enough. That's more than enough. Don't need it to be anything more than it is. She breathed out. Outside, far away in the dark, she could hear the cattle. The ranch settling around her. And somewhere in the house, a man sitting with evidence she had built for him because she had learned to notice things that people thought she couldn't see, working out how to fight back. She had given him the weapon. What he did with it was up to him. But she already knew what kind of man Caleb Morgan was. She'd known since he set a silver dollar down on a porch railing and looked away so she wouldn't feel the weight of owing him. She slept. Caleb rode out before dawn. Anna heard him go. She had been awake already. She'd learned in her weeks at Silver Oak that the ranch had its own particular sounds at 4 in the morning, different from 5, different from 6, and she had mapped them all the way. She mapped everything. The sound of Caleb's boots on the porch boards before first light meant something had moved in the night, something he needed to check before the day properly started. She got up and made coffee. Hank came in 40 minutes later with mud on his boots and an expression she had learned to read as controlled concern, which on Hank's face looked very similar to his ordinary expression, except that his jaw was set slightly harder. "How bad?" she said. He stopped, looked at her, then looked at the coffee she'd already poured. "The south fence line," he said. "Something took out 3 posts. Cattle are through." "How many?" "Don't know yet. Caleb's counting." She set a second cup on the table and sat down across from him. "Was it the storm last night?" There had been a storm. Not a violent one, just the kind that rolls through the territory in the small hours, enough wind to rattle the windows, enough rain to make the ground soft. Hank wrapped his hands around the cup and didn't answer immediately, which was itself an answer. 3 fence posts don't go down in a storm like that, he said finally. Not posts that were properly set. Were they properly set? I set them myself, 6 months ago. He looked up. Those posts were fine. Anna held his gaze. Cord told me something 2 weeks ago, she said. About Ray Sutton. Hank went very still. What did Cord tell you? That Sutton's departure wasn't as clean as it looked. That things around the ranch started going wrong after he left in ways that don't add up. She paused. I've been going through the accounts. I showed Caleb last night. Hank set his cup down. What did you find? His voice was careful now, flat. The way voices get when a man is managing a strong emotion and not quite managing it completely. Enough, she said. Sutton was being paid by Henry Caldwell for months before he left. Whatever he did to the water system, that wasn't the end of it. The silence lasted 4 full seconds. Those fence posts, Hank said slowly. Were they checked recently? Last week. Cord walked the south line, said everything was solid. Then someone went back, Anna said. Hank pushed back from the table and stood up. He was a big man, and when he stood up fast, the room noticed it. I need to tell... Caleb already knows about Sutton and Caldwell. He knows about the water system. Tell him about the fence posts. Tell him everything you just told me. She stood too. And Hank, don't ride out alone to check anything. Not until we know how far this goes. He stopped. He looked at her the way he hadn't looked at her in the first days. Not like an inconvenience. Not like an unknown quantity. Like someone he was genuinely listening to. All right, he said. He went. Caleb came back 2 hours later with Pete and 2 of the other hands, all of them dirty and moving fast. He came straight to the kitchen. She had food ready. She'd had it ready because she understood by now that when men come back from hard work before breakfast, they need feeding before they need talking. And he sat down and ate half a plate before he said a single word. Then he said, 17 head. We got them back. But one of them went into the ravine. How bad? We'll see. He looked at her directly. I talked to Hank. I thought you would. You think the fence posts are connected. I think everything is connected, she said. The water system, the missing supplies, the posts. Caldwell's agent was in town 2 days ago asking whether you were thinking of selling. Caleb pushed his plate to one side. He's going to make another offer, and he wants you in a position where you'll consider it this time. She sat down across from him. A ranch with failing water cattle losses, damaged infrastructure, that's a ranch with a lower asking price. Or a ranch whose owner is desperate enough to sell. I'm not desperate. I know that. He's trying to make you desperate. Caleb looked at his hands. They were still dirty from the morning's work, the kind of deep-set dirt that comes from hours in the ground. I need to contact the territorial marshal. Yes. And a water engineer. Someone who can document what's been done to the system. I can write both letters this morning if you tell me what to say. He looked at her. You don't have to, Caleb. She said it the same way she'd said it the night before. Level, direct. Not unkind, but also not soft. I am very good at letters. I am also very good at making things clear on paper. Let me do the part I'm good at. He held her gaze for a moment. All right, he said. Yes. She got up and found the paper. The letters went out that afternoon with a rider to Tucson. The reply from the territorial marshal's office came back faster than she expected. 3 days, not the week she'd planned for, and it was both better and worse than Caleb had hoped. Better because the marshal was interested. Worse because the marshal wrote that Caldwell had connections in the county land office that made this more complicated than a simple case of sabotage, and that they would need documentation beyond the accounts. What does he mean by documentation beyond the accounts? Pete said. He was standing in the kitchen doorway holding the letter like it had personally insulted him. You've got the payment records. You've got the vendor accounts that don't exist. What more does he want? He wants someone who can testify, Anna said. She was reading the letter over Caleb's shoulder. The accounts prove money moved. He needs someone who can put Ray Sutton on the ranch receiving those payments with knowledge of what the payments were for. Sutton is gone, Hank said. He was at the table with his arms crossed. Left 4 months ago. Nobody knows where. Caldwell's man in Red Creek might know, Caleb said. Caldwell's man isn't going to talk. The room was quiet. Anna folded the letter and set it back on the table. There's another way, she said. All 4 of them looked at her. The vendor account Sutton used, I traced it through 2 names, but I didn't go back far enough. If I have more time with the records from the county land office, I might be able to find a direct transaction. Not Sutton to Caldwell, Caldwell to Sutton, in Caldwell's own records. Those records are in Tucson, Caleb said. I know. Caldwell's office. I know. Caleb looked at her steadily. You're not going to Tucson. I wasn't suggesting. She stopped. I was suggesting you request those records through the marshal, as part of a formal inquiry. Caldwell can block a social request. He can't as easily block a formal inquiry with the territorial office behind it. Another silence. That's the way, Cord said quietly from the corner. He hadn't spoken since the conversation started. Caleb looked at him. She's right, Cord said. He said it like it cost him nothing, which meant it cost him something. Make it formal. Make it official. Don't let him see it coming as a direct challenge. Let it come through the legal channel where he can't throw money at it as fast. Caleb thought for a moment. Then he nodded. Write the second letter, he said to Anna. She was already reaching for the paper. The days between sending the second letter and receiving the response were the kind of days that make a person understand why waiting is its own form of warfare. The ranch ran. That was the thing about work. It didn't stop for crises. The cattle still needed managing. The fence line still needed repair, this time with Hank overseeing every post personally, and Cord riding the perimeter twice a day with the specific energy of a man who has decided that if someone is coming back, they are going to find him ready. The kitchen still needed running. Anna ran it. But she also did something else in those days that she didn't announce and didn't explain. She went back through every account record she could find, not just the past year, but the 4 years before that, back to the period before Caleb's previous foreman left and the period right after. She was looking for a pattern, and patterns she had found always went back further than people expected. She found 3 more things. The first was a lease arrangement for water rights that should have been renewed 18 months ago and hadn't been, not through negligence, she thought, but because someone had allowed it to lapse. The lapsed lease meant a section of Silver Oak's water access was technically uncertain. It would take a lawyer to clarify whether it mattered, but it was exactly the kind of uncertainty that a man like Caldwell would exploit. The second was a discrepancy in the original land title registration. Small, possibly clerical, but the kind of small discrepancy that could become a large problem in the hands of someone with a land office and the knowledge of how to use it. The third was that both of these issues had been flagged in a letter from a Tucson attorney to the previous foreman 2 years ago, recommending that Caleb address them. The letter was in the files. There was no record of a response. She sat with these 3 things for a full evening before she said anything. Then she told Caleb. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he sat back in his chair, and he looked at the ceiling, and he was quiet for long enough that she started to wonder if she should say something. He's been building this for 2 years, Caleb said finally. At least. The lease, the title discrepancy, those aren't Sutton. Sutton came later. Someone identified those vulnerabilities before Sutton was ever brought in. Yes. Caldwell's been patient. Very. Caleb looked at her. How did you find it, the attorney's letter that was buried in files from 2 years ago that nobody has touched? I touch everything, Anna said simply. It's what I do. He held her gaze. You spent years being ignored, he said. She recognized her own words back at her, the ones she'd said the night she'd shown him the first set of accounts. I spent years being ignored, so I learned how to notice things. Yes, she said. And now you're using what you learned to save my ranch. She was quiet for a moment. I'm doing my job. Anna. Caleb. Don't. His voice was quiet, but it had a firmness to it that she hadn't heard him use before. Not forceful, just certain. Don't make it smaller than it is. I can see clearly. You could have come here, done your work, kept your head down. You didn't. You went looking for this because... He stopped. Because the ranch matters, she said. Because the people on it matter. Why? She looked at him. Because I've lived my whole life in places where I was temporary, she said, where I wasn't worth keeping. And for the first time in as long as I can remember, this place doesn't feel temporary. She kept her voice level. That makes me want to protect it. The kitchen was very quiet. Caleb looked at her for a long time without saying anything. When he spoke, his voice was different, lower, more careful, like he was handling something he didn't want to break. It's not temporary, he said. Your position here. I want you to know that. She looked at the table. Good night, she said. She went down the hall and she stood in the dark outside Clara's room, and she breathed until she felt like herself again. The response from the territorial marshal arrived on a Thursday morning, and it was not what anyone expected. It was not good news. The marshal wrote that he had made preliminary inquiries with the county land office in Tucson and had encountered, as he put it, significant resistance and what appears to be procedural interference at the office level. He could not proceed with a formal inquiry without a higher authorization, and obtaining that authorization would take time, possibly months, because Caldwell had connections at the territorial level that were now clearly being activated. He also wrote something else. Something that turned the room cold. He wrote that Ray Sutton had been located in Tucson, and that Sutton had already given a statement to Caldwell's attorney, not to the marshal, claiming that the accounts Anna had found were legitimate business transactions, and that any irregularities in Silver Oak Ranch's records were the result of mismanagement by the current household staff. He's blaming you, Pete said. He was standing with the letter in his hand, and his face had gone from its usual open expression to something harder and angrier than Anna had seen on him before. He's preempting the inquiry, Anna said. She took the letter from Pete and read it herself carefully from the top. Her face gave nothing away. Sutton's statement puts the irregularities on me, which means if Caleb pursues the formal inquiry, the first thing Caldwell's lawyer does is attack the credibility of the person who found the evidence. "That's you," Pete said. "The woman who arrived with 3 coins and a sick sister and no references." "Yes," Anna said. Hank, who had been standing with his arms crossed and his jaw set, made a sound that wasn't quite a word. That's not—" He stopped, started again. "That's not right." "No," Anna agreed. "It's not." Caleb took the letter from her. He read it. She watched him read it, and she watched his face stay controlled, and she thought, this is the moment. This is where a man either folds or doesn't. He set the letter down. "What do we need?" he said. She looked at him. To counter Sutton's statement. "What do we need?" "A witness," she said. "Someone who can confirm the timeline. Who was on this ranch when Sutton was here, and can speak to what he actually did." "Cord," Hank said immediately. "Cord saw things," Anna said. "But he told me himself he's not good with numbers. Sutton's statement is about the accounts. We need someone who knows accounts well enough to explain the inconsistencies in a way that holds up against a lawyer." "That's you," Caleb said. "Yes?" "You can do that." "I can." She paused. "But they'll come after me. Whatever Caldwell's lawyer can find about who I am and where I came from, they'll use it." "Let them," Caleb said. "Caleb." "Let them look," he said. "What are they going to find? A woman who lost her parents, who worked hard, who crossed the territory to find honest work, and who has been running this ranch better in 6 weeks than it was run in the previous 2 years. He shook his head. "Let them look." She met his eyes. "It won't be pleasant," she said. "I know. They'll say I manipulated the accounts myself. They'll say I'm using the position for personal gain. They'll say—" "Anna." He cut her off quietly. "I know what I know. I know who found this. I know who built the case." He held her gaze. "I will not let them take that from you. Not in any room, not in any court." Something in her chest moved in a way she didn't have a name for. "All right," she said. The storm, when it came, arrived on a Friday night 3 days later. Not the legal storm that was still building in Tucson, slow and procedural. The actual storm. The kind that rolls through the territory with no warning and means business thunder cracking down across the mountains and lightning turning the dark into a pale version of noon for half a second at a time and rain that doesn't so much fall as arrive in walls. Anna heard the cattle first. That low, restless movement that livestock make when they sense something the humans haven't caught up with yet. She was up and had her boots on before Hank's voice carried across from the bunkhouse. "Canyon fence, it's going." She came out onto the porch and found Caleb already there, already moving toward the barn. She heard the sound even before he said anything, that particular sound of a fence giving way, which a person who has been on a ranch long enough learns to recognize even through rain and wind. "The canyon pasture," Caleb said. "If they get through to the canyon." "How many cattle?" 30, maybe 40 head in that pasture." He was saddling his horse with the fast, efficient movements of a man who has done this in the dark before. "If they go into the canyon in this—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. A canyon in a flash flood storm with 40 cattle was the kind of situation that ended badly in multiple ways simultaneously. "I'm coming," she said. He looked at her. "Anna, I can ride." She was already moving toward the second horse. "And you need more hands. Hank's going to take the south approach, which means you need someone on the east. It's dangerous." She turned and looked at him directly. "Caleb, so is losing everything." He held her gaze for 1 second. "East approach," he said. "Stay to the high ground. Don't go down into the ravine for any reason, not for any reason." "Understood." She rode. The storm was loud and total, and the rain made everything 15 feet away into a vague shape and a sound. She rode east along the high line the way Caleb had told her, and she found where the fence had gone 2 posts down, just like the south line 3 days ago. Except this time the timing was deliberate in a way that was impossible to pretend otherwise. The storm as cover. The fence already weakened. The cattle had gone through in a mass following their fear, heading down toward the canyon the way cattle do when they're frightened and running in one direction fast, not thinking. She couldn't go down the ravine. Caleb had been clear, and she understood why the rain was filling the lower ground. Fast flash flood risk, and a person on horseback in a flash flood in the dark was not a situation with good outcomes. But she could cut them off. She knew the ground she'd been paying attention for 6 weeks, learning the ranch the way she learned everything methodically and completely. She knew there was a natural choke point on the east approach where the canyon's mouth narrowed between 2 high rock formations. If she could get there ahead of the cattle, she could push them back up toward the pasture rather than let them run into the lower ravine. She pushed the horse hard. She got there. She got there with maybe 30 seconds to spare, pulled her horse across the narrow point, and started making noise. Voiced the rope she'd brought slapping against her leg. Whatever it took turning the leading cattle, who had already made it to the mouth of the canyon. It worked. Partially. The cattle at the front turned. The cattle behind them slowed. There was a moment of terrible uncertainty where she couldn't tell which way the mass would swing back up toward the high ground or around her into the ravine. And she pushed the horse sideways across the point and kept making noise and did not. Despite everything, think about what would happen if they didn't turn. They turned. Hank came from the south at that exact moment, and between the two of them, they pushed the cattle back up toward the broken fence, and then Pete and 2 other hands arrived. And for the next hour, there was nothing in the world except rain and cattle, and the absolute necessary focus of keeping 40 frightened animals moving in the right direction. When it was over, she was soaked through and her hands were shaking, and she was not going to mention the shaking to anyone. Caleb found her at the fence line. He rode up and stopped his horse beside her and looked at the cattle now safely milling in the upper pasture, and then he looked at her. He didn't say anything for a moment. "You were supposed to stay on the high ground," he said. "I did stay on the high ground," she said. "The canyon mouth is high ground. That's technically—" He stopped. "You cut them off at the narrows." "Yes." "Alone." For about 30 seconds. Then Hank came. He was looking at her with an expression she couldn't fully read in the dark and the rain, but she could hear something in his voice that hadn't been there before, something that sat alongside the relief and wasn't quite the same thing. "Are you hurt?" he said. "No." "Sure." "Caleb, I'm fine." He nodded once. He looked at the cattle again. Then he said very quietly, "Thank you." "It's my ranch too," she said. She didn't realize what she'd said until it was already out. The silence afterward had a different texture. She looked ahead. She didn't take it back. There was no unsaying it, and she wasn't sure in this moment, with rain still falling, and the cattle safe, and the smell of the storm starting to ease, that she wanted to. "Yes," Caleb said. His voice was low. "It is." They rode back to the barn side by side, the horses stepping carefully in the wet dark. It was Hank who put the final piece in place. He came to her the next morning earlier than usual, before the rest of the hands were up. She was in the kitchen with the lamp still necessary, because the sun wasn't quite over the edge of the world yet, and he came in and sat down at the table with the expression she'd come to recognize as Hank Briley, about to say something that cost him something. "There was a man here 2 nights ago," he said. "Before the storm. I didn't see him in time to stop him." Anna turned to face him fully. "What man?" "I don't know who he was. He wasn't one of ours. I saw him near the south barn heading toward the canyon pasture, and by the time I got out there he was gone." He paused. "I thought he was just a drifter. It happens. I should have told Caleb right then." "But you didn't." "I thought I was wrong. I thought maybe I'd seen wrong in the dark." He looked at his hands. "I wasn't wrong." "No," Anna said. "You weren't. The fence posts in the canyon pasture, they were cut, not broken cut, at the base where it looks like wear in the dark." He looked up at her. Someone was out there 2 nights ago, and then the storm came, and those posts went down, and I—" He stopped. "I should have said something sooner." "Hank," Anna said, "I need you to tell Caleb everything you just told me, and I need you to write it down. Exactly what you saw when you saw it, what the posts looked like when you checked them." She paused. "Can you do that?" "I'm not much for writing," he said. "Then talk. I'll write it down, and you can tell me if it's right." He looked at her for a long moment. "You're building a case," he said. "Yes." "Against Caldwell?" "Yes." "You think this is enough?" Anna thought about the accounts, the payment records, the lapsed lease, the title discrepancy, Cord's testimony about Sutton, now Hank's eyewitness account of a man at the fence 2 nights before it failed in a storm. "I think it's getting close to enough," she said. "I think what we have now taken together tells a story that's very hard to argue against." Hank was quiet. "That woman," he said, "in town, Clara Whitfield, she's been telling people that you're after the ranch for yourself, that you manipulated the accounts to make yourself look useful." "I know. People are listening to her. Some of them. It could make the legal case harder." Anna went to the stove and poured 2 cups and set one in front of him. "Clara Whitfield is afraid," she said. "Frightened people say frightened things. That doesn't mean the things are true." She sat down. "What matters is what the records say, and the records don't lie." Hank wrapped his hands around the cup. "No," he said. "They don't." He looked at her over the rim. "Caleb's a good man," he said. It didn't quite come out of nowhere, but it felt deliberate, like a thing he'd decided to say, and was saying now. "Best man I've worked for. He doesn't talk much about the personal side, since his wife. But he notices things. The things that matter." He paused. "He noticed you." Anna kept her expression neutral. "Tell me about the man you saw," she said. "Start from the beginning." She reached for the paper. Hank started talking. She started writing. And the case that Henry Caldwell had spent 2 years building against Silver Oak Ranch began slowly to turn. The letter from Tucson arrived on a Tuesday. Anna knew it was important before she opened it because of the seal, not the marshal's office this time, but the territorial governor's office, which was a different weight of paper and a different weight of consequence. She set it on the kitchen table and looked at it for a moment before she called for Caleb. He came in from the barn, still pulling off his work gloves. He saw the letter. He saw her face. He sat down. "Read it," he said. She opened it and read it aloud. The governor's office had authorized a formal investigation into Henry Caldwell's land operations following receipt of documented evidence, the accounts package she'd built, forwarded by the marshal, showing potential fraud in at least 3 separate property transactions in Arizona territory over the past 4 years. Silver Oak Ranch was not the only target. There were 2 other ranchers who had experienced similar patterns of suspicious equipment, failure, water system interference, and opportunistic purchase offers in the months following. A territorial commissioner would arrive in Red Creek within 2 weeks to take formal statements. Anna set the letter down. The kitchen was quiet. Then Pete, who had been standing in the doorway long enough to hear everything, said, 3 ranches. "At least," Anna said. "He was doing this to other people, not just us." "Yes." Hank, who had come in behind Pete without anyone noticing, said, 2 weeks. 2 weeks, Anna confirmed. Caleb had not spoken since she started reading. He was sitting very still with his hands flat on the table and an expression that was hard to read. Not relief, not exactly, but the specific face of a man who has been braced for impact for a long time and is slowly understanding that the impact may be coming from a different direction than he feared. "The other ranchers," he said. "Do we know who?" "The letter doesn't name them." "They'll need to give statements too." "Yes." "That's likely why the commissioner is coming to Red Creek rather than having us go to Tucson. He can take multiple statements in one location." She paused. "It also means Caldwell can't control the setting the way he could in his own territory." Caleb looked up at her. "You knew to push for Red Creek." I suggested the commissioner's visit in the second letter. I wrote that travel to Tucson would create hardship for the ranch during an active operational period. She held his gaze. I also wrote that given Caldwell's connections at the Tucson County office, a neutral location would produce cleaner testimony. A short silence. "You thought of that 2 weeks ago," Caleb said. "I thought of it when I was writing the letter, yes." He shook his head slowly, not in disbelief, in something closer to wonder. "What else do we need to prepare?" he said. "Everything I have is already organized. The accounts, the payment records, Hank's written statement about the man near the fence, Cord's testimony about Sutton." She paused. "There's one more thing I want to verify before the commissioner arrives. The lapsed water lease I wrote to the attorney in Tucson who flagged it originally. I asked if he'd be willing to speak to the irregularity, specifically whether the lapse appears accidental or was allowed to lapse by someone with knowledge of what it would create. And he wrote back yesterday. He said the notification for renewal was sent to the ranch. He has the delivery record, which means either it was received and ignored or it was received and intercepted," Caleb said. "By someone who worked here at the time," she said carefully. "Someone who had access to the incoming mail." Hank made a sound that was not quite a word. "Sutton handled the mail," he said, "before I took it over. That was part of his job." The room absorbed this. "That's the link," Pete said. "That's the whole link. Sutton didn't just interfere with the water system and the fences. He started it. He intercepted the water rights renewal and let the lease lapse, which created the vulnerability Caldwell needed to..." "Pete," Hank said, not unkindly. Pete stopped. "Yes," Anna said. "That's what I believe happened. And I think the attorney's delivery record combined with the payment timeline showing Sutton was already on Caldwell's payroll when the renewal notice arrived gives us the sequence." Caleb stood up from the table. He walked to the window and stood there with his back to the room, the way he did when he was working something through. Nobody spoke. They had all learned in their different ways to give Caleb Morgan the silence he needed to think. Then he turned around. "Anna," he said, "I want you to present the case." She stared at him. "To the commissioner," he said, "when he arrives. I want you to be the one who presents what you've built." "That's Caleb, that's not how it's done. The commissioner will want to speak to you. You're the property owner. I know what I am, and I know what you are." His voice was steady. "You built this case. You found every piece of it. You organized it, you traced it, you understood it well enough to write letters that got the governor's office involved." He paused. "I can stand in that room and say, here are my records and answer questions about cattle counts. But you are the one who can stand in that room and explain exactly what happened and why, and make it impossible to argue against." He held her gaze. "I want you in that room, standing beside me, not behind me." "Hi." The silence was very full. "They'll push back on me," she said. "Caldwell's representation when they hear you've brought your housekeeper to present your case. Let them push back. Caleb, Anna." He crossed his arms. "I have watched you for 6 weeks work harder and think faster and see more clearly than anyone on this ranch. I have watched you turn this household around, find a conspiracy 2 years in the making, build the evidence to expose it, and last week ride out in a storm to save my cattle when you didn't have to." His voice stayed even, but something underneath it was not even at all. "I am not going to stand in front of a territorial commissioner and pretend I built this case myself. And I am not going to let you stand behind me while I take credit for your work." She looked at him. She looked at Hank, whose face was carefully neutral in the way that meant he strongly agreed and was staying out of it. She looked at Pete, who had given up on neutral entirely and was just nodding. She looked at Cord in the corner, who met her eyes and gave one very small, very decisive tilt of his head. "All right," she said. The 2 weeks before the commissioner arrived were the hardest and the strangest. Hard because the work of preparation was enormous, organizing everything into a coherent presentation that a territorial official could follow, without knowing the ranch's history, that could withstand legal challenge, that told the story clearly enough that the shape of what Caldwell had done became undeniable. Strange because the town of Red Creek had heard something was happening, and the town of Red Creek had opinions. The first sign of trouble came from Mrs. Enid Pratt, who ran the boarding house where Anna and Clara had stayed their first week. She came to the ranch on a Wednesday morning, which in itself was notable because Enid Pratt did not make calls to other people's properties, and she asked to speak to Anna privately. They spoke in the kitchen with the door closed. "There's talk," Enid said. She was a woman in her 60s, straight-backed, who said things plainly because she found anything else a waste of time. "About you. About your position here." "I know," Anna said. "Clara Whitfield has been telling people you found these account problems because you manufactured them yourself, that you changed the records to make yourself look important to the ranch owner." "That's not true." "I know it's not true." Enid looked at her levelly. "I'm not here to repeat the accusation. I'm here because I know what it can do when a story like that gets established before the truth does." She paused. "I was there that day in Dawson's store." Anna went still. "I was at the back near the fabrics. I saw everything." Enid folded her hands. "I heard what those women said about you. I watched you walk out with your chin up, and I thought that is a woman who knows who she is." She paused. "I didn't say anything then. I should have. I didn't." "Mrs. Pratt, I'm telling you now because I want to give a statement to whoever is coming from the governor's office. About your character, about what I saw." She lifted her chin. "If it helps." Anna looked at her for a long moment. "It would help," she said quietly. Enid nodded once satisfied and stood up. "Good. Then that's settled." She picked up her bag. "Whatever else people are saying about you, Miss Whitmore, I want you to know that some of us were paying attention from the beginning." She moved toward the door. "That man of yours made a good choice." He's my employer." Enid gave her a look that contained an entire conversation Anna wasn't ready to have. "Good day, Miss Whitmore," she said. She left. Anna stood in the kitchen alone for a moment. "That man of yours." She put it away. She had work to do. Clara Whitfield arrived at the ranch the following Friday. Anna saw her from the window and took a single breath before she went to the door. Clara was alone, no escort, which told Anna she hadn't thought this through entirely, or she'd thought it through too much and decided an audience would complicate things. She was wearing a dark green dress and the composed expression she kept for situations she intended to control. She looked at Anna in the doorway. "I'd like to speak to Caleb," she said. "He's not here," Anna said. "He's in the north pasture. I can send someone to let him know you called." Clara looked past her into the house. It was a particular kind of looking cataloging, assessing the look of someone comparing what they see against what they expected or feared. "Then I'll speak to you," Clara said. They sat in the front room. Anna offered coffee. Clara didn't take it, which Anna noted. "I'm going to be direct," Clara said. "Please," Anna said. "The story about Caldwell, the accounts, the investigation." She paused. "I know it's real. I've heard enough from enough people to understand that something genuinely happened here." She looked at her hands for a moment, then back up. "I was wrong about what I said, about you." Anna said nothing. "I said things that weren't fair," Clara continued. "In town, about your reasons for being here." She kept her voice controlled, but something in it was working very hard. "I thought I had believed for a long time that Caleb would, that eventually—" She stopped. She started again. "I've known Caleb Morgan for 8 years. I watched him grieve his wife. I was patient. I thought patience was the right. I thought if I just—" "Miss Whitfield," Anna said gently. Clara looked at her. "You don't have to explain yourself to me. I said things that could hurt you in front of the commissioner. I know that." Clara's jaw tightened. "I'm not sure why I'm here. I'm not sure what I'm asking." You're asking if there's something you can do, Anna said, to undo some of the harm. Clara looked at her for a long moment. Can there be? Anna thought about it honestly. She thought about the yellow ribbon woman in the store, and the laughter and the words that had followed her out the door. She thought about Clara's whispered campaign through Red Creek, and the way it could still, even now, complicate things. Yes, she said, if you're willing. She told Clara about the commissioner's visit. She told her what would be needed. She asked for one specific thing, not a recantation, not a public apology, just the truth told plainly. If anyone asked Clara Whitfield directly what she actually knew about Anna Whitmore's conduct at Silver Oak Ranch. You'd trust me to do that, Clara said. I'd trust you to decide who you want to be, Anna said. That's not the same thing. Clara was quiet for a long time. He's not going to... She stopped. Caleb, he's not going to choose me, is he? It was barely a question. Anna met her eyes and said nothing because the kindest thing she could do was not answer, and Clara was a smart woman who already knew the answer. Clara nodded slowly. No, she said to herself more than to Anna. No, I didn't think so. She stood up. She looked around the room at the clean windows, the repaired curtain, the small organized order of a house that had been brought back to life, and something in her face shifted. Not defeat. Something more complicated. You've done good work here, she said. It cost her something. Anna could hear it. Thank you, Anna said. Clara left. The night before the commissioner arrived, Caleb found Anna at the kitchen table at 11 o'clock with her papers spread around her going through everything one final time. He sat down across from her. He didn't say anything for a while. She kept working. She had learned that Caleb Morgan's silences weren't empty. They were full of things he was sorting through, and the sorting took time and pushing. It didn't help. My wife's name was Ellen, he said. She stopped writing. She looked up. He was looking at the table, not at her. She died 4 years ago. Fever in the summer. It came fast. He paused. I built the ranch for her originally. She was the one who wanted the land. The bigger spread, the more cattle. I would have been happy with something smaller. A very small, very painful half-smile. She had plans, big ones. Anna didn't speak. She just listened. After she died, I kept building it, he said. Because stopping felt like losing her again. Like admitting the whole thing had been for nothing. He looked up. The house went empty. The domestic side of things, I just stopped caring about it. It didn't matter without someone it was for. Caleb, I'm not saying this so you'll feel sorry for me, he said. I'm saying it because I want you to understand something. He held her gaze. The night you arrived, when I walked into this kitchen at midnight and you were reorganizing the pantry, I stood there, and I felt the house differently. Like something had come back to it. He stopped. I didn't know how to say that. I still don't really. You're saying it now, she said. I'm trying to. He looked at the papers between them. Tomorrow, you're going to walk into a room with a territorial commissioner and men with legal training, and you're going to present a case you built from nothing, and it's not going to be easy. I know. You're not afraid. I didn't say that. No. He almost smiled. You wouldn't. He reached across the table and his hand covered hers briefly, carefully, the way a person touches something they're not sure they have the right to touch. Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever anyone says in that room about you, I need you to know that I know who you are. She looked at his hand on hers. She looked at him. What do you know? She said quietly. I know you walked into a store with 3 coins and a sick sister, and when a man offered you a way out, your first question wasn't about the money. He didn't move his hand. I know you came to a ranch full of people who didn't want you here, and you didn't fight them, and you didn't beg them. You just worked. You fixed the pantry hinge, and you mended the blankets, and you noticed the inconsistency in a vendor account that had been sitting there for months and nobody else saw. His voice was low. I know you rode out in a storm when you didn't have to. I know you built a legal case that is going to stand up in a room full of men who have been practicing law for 20 years. He paused. I know that when I asked why you were doing all of it, you said because this place doesn't feel temporary. She was very still. Anna, he said, I don't want it to be temporary either. Her eyes met his. We have a commissioner arriving tomorrow morning, she said. Her voice was not as steady as she wanted it to be. I know. And a case to present that we cannot afford to be distracted from. I know that too. Then why are you telling me this tonight? He looked at her. He took his hand back slowly, which cost him something. She could see that clearly. Because tomorrow, that room is going to be full of people trying to make you feel like you're nothing, like you don't belong, like you shouldn't be there. He held her gaze. I wanted you to walk in there knowing what I know, so that when they try it, and they will, you have something to stand on. She breathed. That's... She stopped. I know the timing is bad, he said. It's not bad, she said. It's very... She stopped again. She looked at the papers. She looked at him. After tomorrow, she said. Yes, he said. After tomorrow. He stood up. Get some sleep, he said. You have a case to present. He went down the hall. She sat at the kitchen table for a long moment. She thought after tomorrow. She thought, I am going to win this case, and then I'm going to figure out what to do with everything else. She went back to her papers. She worked until 1 in the morning. She slept 4 hours and woke up certain. The commissioner's name was Harris. William Harris, a man of 50 with the efficient, weathered manner of someone who has spent years in rooms where people are trying to mislead him and has developed a very good sense for when it's happening. He arrived with a clerk and a territorial attorney and set up in the back room of Red Creek's courthouse, which was also used for town meetings and school functions, and still had a child's drawing of a horse pinned to one wall. Caldwell's representative was a lawyer from Tucson named Forsythe. Well-dressed, deliberate, with the quiet confidence of someone who bills by the hour and has never lost a case he cared about. There were 2 other ranchers in the room. Anna had learned their names the night before. Thomas Greer and Joseph Aldrich, both of whom had experienced near-identical patterns of sabotage to Silver Oak in the past 18 months. Both of them looked at her when she came in with Caleb, with an expression of careful assessment. Forsythe looked at her with something else entirely. Mr. Morgan, Forsythe said when they were seated, I understand you've brought your housekeeper to represent your interests. I've brought the person who built this case, Caleb said. She'll present it. Forsythe smiled. It was a professional smile, practice designed to suggest that what was happening was not a problem at all, merely an amusing curiosity. Commissioner Harris, perhaps we might... I'll hear from whoever Mr. Morgan wants to speak for him, Harris said flatly. He looked at Anna. Miss Whitmore. She stood. She had the papers organized in front of her in the order she'd decided on 2 nights ago. Not chronological, because chronological was how you told a story. She was telling a case. She organized it by the weight of the evidence, lightest to heaviest, so that by the time she finished, the room had been walking toward the conclusion for 20 minutes and arrived there without being pushed. She started with the payment records. She explained each one clearly and without ornamentation, the way the evidence was clear and unornamented itself. She showed how the vendor accounts traced back. She showed the timeline of Sutton's payments against the timeline of the events at Silver Oak. She showed the water lease renewal notice delivery record against the payment record, showing Sutton was already on Caldwell's payroll when the notice arrived. Forsythe interrupted twice in the first 10 minutes. Harris overruled both interruptions. She kept going. When she got to Hank's statement about the man near the fence, she read it exactly as Hank had told her. Plain direct, a man saying what he saw without dressing it up. She presented Cord's account of Sutton's behavior in the months before he left. She presented Enid Pratt's statement about Anna's character, which she had specifically included, not because it was legally central, but because she knew Forsyth was going to make the case about her, and she wanted to establish before he started that people who had known her since she arrived in Red Creek had something to say on the subject. She could feel Forsyth waiting for her to finish. She finished. "Commissioner," Forsyth said, and he was already standing. "I think what we've heard today is a very well-organized collection of circumstantial—" "The vendor accounts aren't circumstantial," Anna said. "They're documented payment records traceable through the territorial tax filings." Forsyth looked at her. He adjusted his approach so smoothly you could almost miss that he'd done it. "Miss Whitmore, your accounting background." "I don't have a formal accounting background," she said. "I have 12 years of managing household and estate finances for families who couldn't afford to hire accountants. I have 12 years of finding where money goes when the people responsible for it would rather you didn't know. And before coming to Silver Oak Ranch, you were—" "A woman with 3 coins in her pocket and a sick sister," she said. "Yes, you can ask anyone in Red Creek." She held his gaze. "I'm not embarrassed by that. It's where I started. It's not what I built while I was here." Harris looked at Forsyth. "Do you have questions relevant to the evidence, Mr. Forsyth?" Forsyth did. He had many. He worked through them with the methodical pressure of a man who specializes in finding the small inconsistency that undoes a case. He didn't find one. Anna had spent 2 weeks making sure he wouldn't. Every question she answered directly. Every challenge to the documentation she met with the specific page and line that answered it. When he pushed on the water lease, she produced the attorney's letter and the delivery record. When he questioned Hank's eyewitness account, she produced a second statement from Pete, who had been in the south barn that same night and had also seen a figure moving toward the canyon pasture, something she had not mentioned in her opening presentation. Forsyth went still when she produced that. "You held that back," he said. "I presented the evidence in the order I planned," she said. "I wasn't hiding it. It's in the package Commissioner Harris has already received." Harris confirmed this without expression. Forsyth sat down, not dramatically. Just he sat down, and the quality of his sitting down was different from before. Something had gone out of it. Thomas Greer, the rancher to Caleb's left, leaned forward. "Commissioner," he said, "I'd like to say that the pattern Miss Whitmore has documented at Silver Oak is identical in structure to what occurred on my property. I didn't understand what I was looking at before today." Harris made a note. Joseph Aldrich said, "Same." The formal determination took 3 days. Harris was thorough. Anna had expected thorough. She had built the case for thorough. On the 3rd day, Harris issued his preliminary finding sufficient evidence of coordinated fraud and property sabotage to warrant a full territorial investigation into Henry Caldwell's land acquisition practices with specific criminal referrals related to the activities at Silver Oak Ranch Greer's property and Aldrich's property. Caldwell's Tucson connections were noted in the finding as a conflict of interest requiring external review. Forsyth accepted the finding with the controlled expression of a man who will appeal this and knows he doesn't have the ground to stand on, that he needs to appeal it. Caleb read the finding in Harris's office with Anna beside him. He read it twice. Then he set it down, and he looked at her, and she could see in his face all of it, the relief and the anger that had been held back for weeks. The grief for the 2 years he hadn't known what was happening to his ranch, and underneath all of that, something else. Something directed specifically at her. "You did this," he said. "We did this," she said. "Your men testified. Your records, Anna." She stopped. "You did this," he said again. Not accusatory. The opposite. The kind of statement that is also a recognition, a placing of something where it belongs. She looked at him. "Yes," she said. "I did." Outside the courthouse, the street was going about its ordinary business. Red Creek on a Thursday afternoon looked the same as it always did, except that when Anna walked out with Caleb, a few people on the boardwalk were watching, and the watching had a different quality from that first day outside Dawson's store. Not all of them. Not the yellow ribbon woman who was not present, and whom Anna suspected would avoid her for some time. Not everyone, but some. Enid Pratt, who was crossing the street with a basket, stopped and nodded a small, decisive nod that said everything it needed to. Pete was waiting with the wagon. Hank was with him, which was not strictly necessary, since they could have managed with just Pete. But Hank was there. "Well," Pete said. "Formal investigation," Anna said. "Criminal referrals." Pete made a sound that was somewhere between a shout and a laugh. Hank put his hand briefly on her shoulder, one firm press, and then took it away and looked somewhere else and cleared his throat. "Good," he said. "Then let's go home." Home. She climbed up into the wagon. Caleb climbed up beside her. Not in the back. Beside her. And for a moment before Pete flicked the reins and the wagon began to move, Caleb's hand found hers on the bench between them. He didn't look at her. She didn't look at him. His hand stayed where it was. The wagon moved down the main street of Red Creek, and she thought after tomorrow. She thought it is after tomorrow now. She held very still. His hand didn't move, and neither did hers. Nobody talked about anything else in Red Creek for 2 weeks. That was the thing about a small town. It had a limited supply of new information, and it worked what it had very thoroughly. The investigation into Henry Caldwell's land operations was the kind of story that had everything money. Corruption, a villain with connections, 3 ranchers who had come within reach of losing everything. And at the center of it, a woman who had arrived in town with 3 coins and no prospects and somehow dismantled a 2-year conspiracy using nothing but a ledger and the habit of paying attention. People had opinions about this. They had many opinions, and they shared them freely. Anna heard most of them secondhand through Pete, who had an extraordinary talent for absorbing the social atmosphere of Red Creek on his supply runs and reporting it back to the ranch with the enthusiastic detail of someone who does not yet understand that not everything one overhears needs to be repeated. "Mrs. Henley at the dressmaker's says you're remarkable," Pete said one morning, setting down the supply crates with less efficiency than usual because he was already talking. "Old Mr. Pruitt at the feed store says he always knew something was off about Caldwell. He didn't say that before, but he's saying it now, and—" He paused in a way that suggested the next part required some preparation. "Pete," Anna said. "Gerald Dawson wants to apologize." The kitchen was quiet. "In person," Pete added. "He asked me to tell you. He wants to come to the ranch, and his words set things right." Anna turned back to the stove. "He can come on Saturday," she said. "I'll make coffee." Pete blinked. "That's it? He turned you away in front of half the town, and you're just going to—" "Make coffee," Anna said. "Yes." Pete looked at Hank, who was at the table. Hank shrugged with the expression of a man who has stopped being surprised by Anna Whitmore and has made his peace with it. "She's not what I expected," Pete told Hank in a stage whisper that was clearly audible to everyone in the room. "No," Hank agreed. "She's not." Caleb had said after tomorrow, and then tomorrow had come and gone, and the days after it had been consumed by the formal investigation process, statements, documentation, correspondence with the territorial attorney's office, the practical work of the ranch that didn't pause for legal proceedings. There had been no moment that stood still long enough to hold the conversation that was waiting between them. Or that was what Anna told herself when she was being honest about why she hadn't brought it up. When she was being more honest, she admitted she was afraid. Not of Caleb, of the size of what was there, of wanting something that much, and the knowledge deeply ingrained through years of experience that wanting something that much was exactly how you set yourself up to lose it. She kept working. She always kept working when she didn't know what else to do. The water system engineer came from Tucson and confirmed what she'd suspected: 3 separate interference points, all of them requiring specific knowledge of the system's design, all of them documented for the investigation. The lapsed water lease was renewed, the territorial attorney having expedited it given the circumstances. The title discrepancy was resolved by the same attorney, who wrote that it had in fact been manufactured a small alteration to the original filing that would have created grounds for a legal challenge to Caleb's ownership if Caldwell had ever gotten the ranch to a point of forced sale. Caleb read that last letter at the kitchen table and sat with it for a long time. He was going to take everything, he said finally. Not just buy it low, take it. Yes, Anna said. The title discrepancy would have been his grounds. In a territorial court with his connections with a manufactured document, yes, it could have worked. She paused. It would have worked. If you hadn't caught Sutton taking things and let him go. It shook the timeline. Things started moving faster than Caldwell planned, which is probably why he used the storm last month instead of waiting for a cleaner opportunity. If the storm hadn't happened, we might not have found Hank's witness account in time, she said. The storm was actually... She stopped. What? I was going to say it was lucky, she said slowly. But it wasn't luck. He moved the timeline up because he was worried we were getting close. Which means he was already watching the ranch. She frowned. Which means someone in Red Creek was telling him what was happening here. Caleb went very still. Who? He said. I don't know yet. And she said it the way she always said things she didn't know. Yet not as a defeat, as a problem she hadn't finished with. She went back to the accounts that evening, and she looked at it from the other direction. Not who was receiving information, but who would have had access to it. Who came to the ranch regularly. Who had opportunity to observe without being obvious about it. She found it at 11 o'clock. She sat with it for a while. Then she went and knocked on Caleb's office door. He opened it. He looked at her face. Tell me, he said. The supply delivery man, she said. Marcus Webb. He's made 8 deliveries to the ranch in the past 4 months. His route also takes him to Caldwell's Tucson office. I found the connection in the delivery company's public contracts. He's been in a position to observe what's changing on the ranch and report it directly. Caleb leaned against the doorframe. Marcus Webb, he said. He's not the main story. He's how Caldwell was staying informed. She paused. The marshal should know. Yes. Caleb looked at her. You found this at 11 at night. I was thinking about it this afternoon and I wanted to follow the thread. Anna. It mattered. Everything matters to you, he said. Everything on this ranch. Every thread, every number, every discrepancy. She looked at him. The hallway between them was narrow and lit by only the lamp she'd carried from the kitchen, and he was very close. Close enough that she could see his expression, clearly tired, the way men who carry large things for a long time are tired, but something else underneath that had been building for a while. I told you, she said. It doesn't feel temporary. No, he said. It doesn't. Neither of them moved. We keep not having the conversation, she said. I know. There's always something. I know. He straightened from the doorframe. He reached out and took the lamp from her hand and set it on the small table in the hallway, carefully giving himself a moment. Anna, I am not going to wait for a day when there's nothing else to deal with. That day doesn't exist on a working ranch, and I think we've both established that there will always be another thread to follow. She looked at him. Her heart was doing something complicated that she was not going to acknowledge. Then what are you going to do? She said. I'm going to say this before something else needs fixing, he said. I love you. I have been working up to understanding that clearly for 6 weeks, and I understand it clearly now. He held her gaze. I know this started as a job. I know you came here because you had 3 coins and no options. I know you are not a woman who needs saving, and I am not offering to save you. I am asking. He stopped. Started again. I am asking if you would be willing to stay, not as the housekeeper, as Caleb. Let me finish. She was quiet. As the person this ranch belongs to, he said, with me, because that's what it is. This is your ranch as much as mine. You found its problems and you fixed them, and you fought for it in a room full of men who tried to make you feel like nothing, and you won. His voice was steady, but it cost him something to keep it that way. I want you here. I want you here in every room, not because I hired you to be here, but because every time you're not in the room, I notice it." He looked at her. "I have been alone for 4 years, and I thought that was who I was now. I don't think that anymore." The lamp between them threw a warm, narrow light. "You told me about Ellen," she said quietly. "Yes?" "You loved her." "I did." No hesitation. "That doesn't reduce what I'm telling you now. It's not a competition." He held her gaze. "There's what was. And there's what is. And what is you in my kitchen at midnight reorganizing things that didn't need reorganizing yet because you needed to have something to do with your hands. You telling me that broken things aren't always useless. You riding out in a storm when I didn't ask you to because you'd already decided this place was worth protecting." Her eyes were burning. She was not going to cry in a hallway. "I make coffee very early," she said. "And I will always notice when something is wrong with the accounts." "I know," he said. "I'm counting on it." "And Clara," he said, "has been teaching Hank the rules of a card game she invented last week, and Hank has been losing on purpose, and nobody is supposed to know that." He paused. "She belongs here too. She already knows it." Anna made a sound that was almost a laugh and not quite. "I am very difficult," she said. "I have strong opinions about supply organization, and I will not back down from them." "Anna, I'm telling you." "I know who you are," he said. "I've been watching you for 6 weeks. I know exactly who you are." She looked at him. She thought about 3 coins on a counter. She thought about a silver dollar set down without ceremony. She thought about a voice behind her on the boardwalk, saying, "Ride with me tonight," and the way it had felt like an offer from someone who had seen something in her that she'd almost stopped believing was visible. She thought about mending blankets in the kitchen and Hank picking up a needle without being asked. She thought about Clara's face when she said the mattress has real stuffing, like it was a miracle. She thought about riding in a storm and the cattle turning and Caleb finding her at the fence line and saying, "Are you hurt?" in a voice that meant something more than the question. She thought this is real. She thought I spent so long in places that weren't mine that I stopped believing I would know the difference when I found one that was. She knew the difference. "Yes," she said. He looked at her. "Yes," she said again clearly. "I'll stay, not as the housekeeper." He crossed the space between them and his hands came up to her face, careful and certain, the way he did everything deliberate, no wasted motion. And he kissed her. And it was not complicated. It was the simplest thing in the world, the way things are simple when they're right. She put her hands against his chest, and she felt him breathe. They stood in the narrow hallway, and the lamp burned quietly between them, and outside the ranch was dark and still and completely peacefully theirs. Baptiste. Gerald Dawson came on Saturday. He came alone without his wife, which Anna thought was either very brave or very calculated, and she settled on very brave. When she saw his face, a man who has prepared a speech and is dreading giving it, but has decided it has to be given. She made coffee. She made it right, the way she made everything, and she set a cup in front of him at the kitchen table and sat across from him and let him talk. He said he was sorry. He said it in the plain, unornamented way that genuine apologies come not dressed up, not explained away, just put down on the table between them like the 3 coins that had started all of this. He said he had thought about that afternoon many times since news of the investigation spread through Red Creek. He said he had daughters, 2 of them, and he had thought about his daughters, and about what would happen if they came to a counter somewhere with everything they had, and it wasn't enough. Anna listened. She let him finish. Then she said, "Mr. Dawson, I don't hold it against you." He looked up surprised. He'd been ready for something harder. "You didn't know me," she said. "You had a policy, and you followed it. The world didn't end because you said no." She looked at him directly. "What I needed that day was medicine for my sister, and I got it. What I needed after that was a chance to show what I could do, and I got that too." She paused. "Everything that happened after came from what I built, not from what you denied me." Dawson looked at her for a long moment. "You're very generous," he said. "I'm practical," she said. Red Creek is where I live now. I'd rather live in it without that between us." He wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. "The ranch account," he said. "If you do the supply ordering, I want you to know you'll have no trouble with me, whatever you need." "I know," she said. "Thank you." He drank his coffee. He left looking lighter than when he came in, and Anna thought this is also part of the work. Not the ledgers and the legal proceedings, but this, the small renegotiations of what people believe about each other, the daily business of choosing not to carry things that don't need carrying. The twist that nobody had seen coming arrived on a Wednesday 3 weeks after the commissioner's finding. It arrived in the form of a letter from the territorial attorney's office, and it was addressed not to Caleb but to Anna. She opened it in the kitchen alone early morning before anyone else was up. She read it twice. She set it down. She stood very still for a moment. Then she picked it up and read it a third time, because the first 2 times she had thought she was misunderstanding something, and the third time confirmed she wasn't. The territorial attorney wrote that in reviewing the documentation submitted for the Caldwell investigation, it had come to the office's attention that the property title discrepancy that Caldwell had manufactured included a specific provision buried in the altered filing designed to be used as a legal weapon that inadvertently created a clear path for the legitimate restoration of title clarity. In resolving that discrepancy, the territorial attorney had gone back to the original land survey records and discovered that the southern water rights, the ones affected by the lapsed lease, had never actually been transferred out of the original territorial land grant. They had always legally been part of Silver Oak Ranch's holdings. The lease that had been allowed to lapse was, strictly speaking, unnecessary. The water rights had never needed leasing because Silver Oak had always owned them outright. What Caldwell had used as a vulnerability was, in the end, not a vulnerability at all. He had spent 2 years engineering a trap around a weakness that didn't exist. Anna read the letter a 4th time. Then she started to laugh. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a quiet, helpless laugh that came up from somewhere she hadn't expected it, the kind of laughter that is very close to something else and knows it. Caleb walked into the kitchen and found her at the table with a letter in her hand, laughing with her eyes bright and one hand over her mouth. He stopped. "What happened?" he said, not alarmed, curious, watching her with that careful attention he gave to things that mattered. She handed him the letter. He read it. He sat down slowly. He read it again. "The water rights," he said, "were always yours," she said. "He built the whole thing 2 years, 4 months of Sutton, the lease, the title filing, all of it around a problem that didn't exist." Caleb set the letter down. He looked at it. Then he looked at her. "He lost," he said. "Before he started," she said. Another silence. Then Caleb's face changed. Not dramatically, because Caleb Morgan did not do things dramatically, but something in it eased in a way she hadn't seen before. Something that had been held tight for a very long time. He reached across the table. She took his hand. "It's over," he said. "Yes," she said. "It is." The final piece came from a direction nobody expected. Ray Sutton, located in Tucson and facing criminal charges for his role in the conspiracy, made a deal with the territorial attorney's office. He gave a full written statement confirming everything, every payment, every act of deliberate sabotage, every instruction received from Caldwell's operation. In exchange for cooperation, he received a reduced sentence. His statement named 4 people beyond himself. 2 were Caldwell employees. 1 was the delivery man Marcus Webb. The 4th was a land office clerk who had facilitated the title alteration. Henry Caldwell himself, faced with the statement and the documented evidence Anna had built, attempted to negotiate. The territorial attorney declined to negotiate. The trial was scheduled for the following spring in Tucson. Caleb did not go to Tucson for the trial. He sent Anna's documentation, the attorney handled the rest, and Caleb stayed at the ranch because the ranch needed him, and because he had, as he told Hank, with his characteristic economy of expression, no interest in watching Henry Caldwell explain himself in a courtroom. "That's what the attorney is for," he said. Hank, who had been hoping for at least a trip to Tucson, accepted this with the expression of a man who knew better than to argue. Hacha. Clara Whitfield left Red Creek in the spring. She went east back to family in St. Louis, as the town heard it, or possibly to somewhere else entirely, which was also possible, and which Anna thought might be closer to the truth. She left without ceremony, which was both unlike the Clara Whitfield of 6 months ago, and completely in keeping with the woman Anna had seen that afternoon in the front room when Clara said, "You've done good work here," and meant it. Anna hoped she found what she was looking for. She thought genuinely that she might. On a Thursday evening in April, with the Arizona Territory moving into the warm season and the ranch running better than it had in years, Caleb Morgan asked Anna Whitmore to marry him. He did not do it dramatically. He did not plan an elaborate gesture or find a particular moment designed to be memorable. He did it the way he did everything, directly, deliberately, with very few words, and all of them true. They were in the kitchen. She was at the table finishing a supply ledger. He was at the counter pouring the last of the evening coffee. He set a cup beside her the way he had that first night when she was reorganizing the pantry on her knees, and then instead of going back to the counter, he sat down next to her and he said, "Marry me." She looked up from the ledger. "Marry me," he said again. Not a question the second time, not a demand, just a thing that was true, stated as plainly as all the other true things he said. "You're not going to make a speech about it," she said. "Do you want a speech?" She considered. "No, I love you," he said. "This is yours. You are—" He paused, choosing the right word with the care he always gave to words. "You are the reason this place feels like what it was supposed to feel like." He looked at her directly. "That's all I have." "That's everything," she said. She closed the ledger. "Yes," she said. "I'll marry you." He looked at her. She looked at him. "All right," he said. He picked up his coffee. She picked up hers. They sat together in the kitchen at Silver Oak Ranch, in the place that was theirs, and outside the territory was going dark and quiet and full of the particular stars that only show up in a sky that big, and everything that had happened. The 3 coins on a counter, the silver dollar on the railing, the storm and the cattle and the courtroom and the ledgers and the mended blankets. All of it had led to this kitchen and this table and 2 cups of coffee and a man and a woman who had chosen each other the same way they did everything, honestly and without apology and with full knowledge of what they were choosing. Clara grew up at Silver Oak Ranch. She learned to ride before she was 13, to manage accounts before she was 15, to read a water survey and identify a weak fence post and negotiate with supply vendors and give as good as she got in any room she walked into. She had Hank's stubbornness and Anna's clarity and something all her own, a particular bright directness that made people feel when she looked at them like they had been seen accurately for the first time. Hank taught her cards. Cord taught her the land. Pete taught her everything he knew about horses and considerably less than he thought he knew about everything else. Caleb taught her by example, which is the best way how to keep your word, how to stand still in a hard moment, how to treat land and animals and people with the same fundamental respect. Anna taught her the rest. She taught her that a ledger is a kind of truth-telling, that work is not a punishment or a burden, but the specific satisfaction of making something better than you found it, that the world will try repeatedly and with some creativity to tell you that your value is located in your money or your family or your beauty or your position, and that the world is wrong about this and always has been. She taught her that a person can arrive in a strange town with nothing in their pockets and everything that matters intact, and that the second thing is the only one you can build from. She taught her by 30 years of living it that kindness is not weakness, and generosity is not naivety, and a woman who pays attention and refuses to be dismissed is more powerful than most rooms are prepared for. Years later, when Clara Whitmore Morgan was running her own business in Red Creek, a small land management office that specialized in helping frontier families with exactly the kind of title discrepancies and water rights confusion that had once nearly cost Silver Oak everything people would ask her where she learned to read accounts the way she did, She always gave the same answer. "My sister," she said. "She taught me that things being broken don't make them useless. They just need someone to bother." Duh. There is a town in Arizona that still tells the story. Not as a legend, not as something that happened to someone else long ago, but as a local fact, the kind of story that gets told when a family sits down to dinner or when two people meet for the first time and find they're from the same part of the territory. They tell about the woman who came to a general store with 3 coins and the shopkeeper who said no, and the laughter that followed her out the door. They tell about the cowboy who saw it all. Of it not just the refusal, but the way she left the dignity of it. The specific courage of a person who will not let you watch them break, and who followed her out and said, "Ride with me tonight," not as a rescue, but as a recognition. They tell about the ledgers and the storm and the courtroom. They tell about Henry Caldwell, who spent 2 years building a trap around a weakness that didn't exist, and who lost everything to a woman he never bothered to see clearly. They tell about Silver Oak Ranch, which ran for 30 more years under its proper owners, which passed to the next generation and the next, and which never once in drought or hard winter or cattle sickness, or any of the dozen other things the territory threw at it, came close to failing again. Because the woman who kept its books knew how to read them, and the man who owned it knew what was worth protecting. And between those two things, there was no weakness in it anywhere. The story ends the way all the true stories end, not with a single moment, but with a life accumulated and continuous, made up of 10,000 small choices that all pointed in the same direction. Anna Whitmore came to Red Creek with 3 coins and walked out with everything that mattered. She had known who she was from the beginning. It just took one cowboy standing on a boardwalk in the Arizona sun, hat in hand, to say quietly, with no ceremony, and all the weight in the world, "I see you." And that was enough. That was everything.